Well, it's the age-old question, right? Should Seattle have ran the ball at the 1 yard line? Real quick, everyone, make sure you follow me on Twitter. My Twitter, the link is in the description. It's at Jackson Kruger, so check that out. But anyways, back to the video. It's interesting, right? Because this is something that it happened in 2014. We're still talking about it 7 years later, and it doesn't seem like we have a definitive answer. So I wanted to make a video and kind of give my thoughts on it because it's interesting. And so I think first we have to explain what actually happened there. So first, Seattle, they're in 11 personnel, which means one tight end and one halfback, three wide receivers. What New England did was they had no safeties in the game. They did have three cornerbacks in the game. Everyone else is either a defensive lineman or a linebacker. So that's the situation right off the bat, is New England doing what they can to, basically force Seattle to throw the ball. And let's actually look at the tape for a second. So this is the play. It's a cover one man coverage play. But again, a couple guys who are playing man are also in position to potentially stop the run. So that's how this play is currently working. When reading about it and, doing research for this video, a lot of people said, well, if they wanted to run it, where would you run it? Matt Patricia has certainly, his back's pretty warm with how often he's pat himself on the back, giving himself credit for what New England did on this play. And it is true, they did the right thing for sure. They deserve credit on it. If Seattle wanted to run it, it could look something like this. But again, there's guys both on the edge who could potentially run over. You have a linebacker who could run in and make a play. So, and not to mention, there's no guarantee everyone makes their blocks. Basically, the argument is, if you are going to run the ball, well, where are you going to run it? So instead, they go for a pick play, high percentage. Malcolm Butler makes a great play. Okay, so there you have it. Great defensive play call. That's the only reason that it happened. So Seattle made the right decision to not run the ball there. To me, that's a really poor argument. I do not think that's a good argument. My reasoning for it is no one was forcing you to play 11 personnel. Seattle chose to only have one tight end in the game. If they wanted to have more tight ends in the game, they could have put more tight ends in the game and still ran the football. So I get it that, yes, once you get to that point, there is logic, but you could have just had a couple extra tight ends and then ran the football. So that's not a great argument, I don't think. It's not an argument that I really consider to be the correct one. And in fact, there's a few arguments that I just want to throw out right off the bat. One of them is that there wasn't enough time. They had to throw it because there's only, under 30 seconds left. This is not true. There was over a minute left once it, came to second down. So they had time. They burned a lot of the clock because they wanted to, if they scored a touchdown, not let New England be able to have time left. So that's not a really good argument either. So how do we determine if it was the right call? The best way, I think, to determine it is simply to look at, well, what is the better outcome typically? If you run the ball or if you throw the ball? Let's look at it in a vacuum first, and then we'll look at it using, these two teams. So this chart is according to Football Outsiders. So first, this is goal to go. There is no at the 1 yard line chart, unfortunately. But if we're looking at goal to go targets, this is from 2016 to 2018. So similar era, a couple years later, but basically the same. They say that by far and away, the best thing to do is a drag route in this situation. That gives you an EPA of 0.35 and a positive play percentage of 52%. So, that's on the left, stuff like that. That's where you're at. Meanwhile, for a rushing play, even the best running play, power, that's an EPA of, 0.1. Now, again, worth mentioning, this is not the best data to use. It's not perfect because we don't have data on goal line situations here. All I have is the goal to go situations, which is a little bit different. And I would suspect that it would get a little bit better if it was at the 1 yard line, but that's just a guess. I don't know that for a fact. However, that being said, a drag route has a higher positive play percentage than even the best running play does. So it seems logical to say that it's probably in a vacuum the better move to, run a pick play than it is to run the football. Now, some of you will make the argument that, okay, sure, but that's in a vacuum. That's just using, every single running back. Marshawn Lynch is not a typical running back, and that is very true. I've said, and I stand by this, Marshawn Lynch is the best running back I've ever seen. I'm not as old enough to see Barry Sanders and some of those guys. started watching football in the mid 2000s, so that's what I'm working with. But Marshawn Lynch, he was the best I've ever seen. He's incredible. However, he's not necessarily the best at goal line situations. I think that the stat that kept getting thrown out there was he was only 1 for 5 that season, but that's a 5 try sample size. You can't really use that, and 3 of those were in the same game. Where he got the touchdown in that game. So it's a little bit weird to use that as a sample size. And, again, a couple go the way. And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, 3 out of 5, great sample size. So, or, great percentage by him. So that's not a great argument. But what's interesting is if you look at the sample size and make it a little bigger, it's still not great in Marshawn Lynch's favor. This chart is according to fieldgoals.com, spelled Gulls. This is a SB Nation blog. But what's happening here is this is the list of every single running back who had at least 10 touchdowns from the 1 yard line. How many carries did it take them to do it? And what was their percentage over a 3-year stretch? Marshawn Lynch had the worst percentage out of all the guys who got at least 10 touchdowns. Again, there's a bit of a selection bias here because if you're not very good at the goal line, then you're not going to get 10 touchdowns. You won't get that many opportunities. But still, only a 45% chance, and this is 22 carries, so it's not we have hundreds to work with, but it's a bigger sample size. And it at least goes to show it's not like he's known for his goal line carries. Now, what some people might also say is, okay, but I mean, Marshawn Lynch, he was having a great game. I mean, he was, right in his prime, 2014 Super Bowl. The Patriots had no answer. Well, they did when it really came down to it. So on 3rd down and 4 or less, Lynch was just 1 for 4. In terms of getting the necessary yards. And on a 3rd down and 2 or 3rd down and 1, Lynch was just 1 for 3 in that game. So they had stuffed him a couple of times already. So it's not out of the question to think that they would stuff him again. Personally, this is just my logic. I think that if this is a 4th down play, I probably would agree with it. To me, the reason why I still say I think it was probably the wrong call is there's a higher percentage of turning the ball over when you throw it than when you run it. And I think that it was, only 2nd down. You still have 2 more downs to work with if you run the ball, no matter what. If you throw the ball, that's not necessarily the case. Sure, Lynch could fumble it, but there's a much higher percentage of it. It's almost like twice as high that you throw an interception than you fumble the football, and you tell Lynch, 2 hands on the ball no matter what, right? So to me, I think that that's kind of the X factor that doesn't get talked about enough, and why I would, me personally, that's why I would still say probably not the right call. It's not a horrible call, I don't think. I think that you could definitely make the argument that it was the right call. I would say to get if it was 4th down, I would actually defend the call, but it wasn't 4th down. So to me, that's really the difference because, like a pick play seems to be the play that has the highest percentage chance of working. That's what it seems to be, especially on a drag route. That makes sense to me. But it just didn't happen. Malcolm Butler made a great play, and Russell Wilson maybe could have ate the ball or throw it a little bit lower, but he was only a 3rd-year player. It's hard to blame him too much. Tough situation, but yeah, it's a fun discussion, I think. And this is one that we'll never stop talking about. 50 years from now, some people will be saying it's the right call. Some people will be saying it's the wrong call. But to me, I can't say it's the right call. One, it's maybe a slight advantage to throw the ball, but you're having a much bigger chance of turning the ball over, especially when you have a young quarterback throwing the football. That's just the way I view it. But maybe you guys disagree. Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.